Chapter 1. Chastity. Wow, who's the guy? Your boyfriend? He's unbelievably hot. I flinched as a new college friend sidled up next to me and sat down on the ledge I'd been occupying. The man she was looking at was a chick magnet. It was true. With dark, short-styled hair, figure-hugging jeans, and a washed-out vintage band t-shirt a size too small that showed off his ripped muscles. He lifted his arm and waved at me, a huge smile causing him to flash his pearly whites at me. I waved back, shaking my head. He wore what he liked, but sure didn't look like my friend's father's. Not my boyfriend, my dad, I said, matter-of-factly as I stood and slung my bag over my shoulder and grabbed my suitcase. Have a great break. I walked away from Claire, whose mouth was still hanging open as she continued to stare at my father. I knew all the questions that would be running through her mind. First and foremost would be, how old was he when you were born? I'd been asked the question 1,000 times before.
Hey, Chastity, how was your week?
He asked, leaning casually against his red convertible, like an old rerun of Magnum P.I. I narrowed my eyes at him. Seriously, Dad, can't you wear normal-fitting shirts like everyone else's father? He laughed and pushed off from the car, his big arms encircling me and squeezing tight.
I've missed you.
I let my eyes close as I inhaled his scent. The spicy polo he'd been using since I was little engulfed me and made me yearn for Friday night movies and popcorn that had been our tradition. Me too. I stepped back and he held open the passenger side door for me. Always a gentleman, as my mother would say. Pity she hadn't held on to him long enough for us to be a real family. Thanks. I slid into the small, older BMW and he got in the other side after closing my door and walking around the hood.
Do I really embarrass you?
Dad asked, his huge biceps flexing as he turned on the ignition and grabbed the gear shift. I rolled my eyes at him in an exaggerated way. Some of my oblivious friends think you're my boyfriend when they first see you. They're shocked when I say you're my father. He chuckled and pulled into St. Pete traffic.
Not my fault I take care of myself and didn't age as well as your mother.
Age as badly, you mean? Hey, leave her out of it. She doesn't have the time you do to spend hours in the gym, you know. I shot back, and then had to work hard not to laugh when he gave me a side-eye look that said, you know what I mean. I sighed and glanced out the window, watching the palm trees fly by. My dad wasn't that young. I was born on his 21st birthday, and he always said I was the best birthday present he ever received. The problem was, I was now 21, and instead of looking 42 like he should, my dad looked 30, maybe 35, if you looked really close at the crow's feet around his eyes. But his body was better than any 30-year-old I'd ever seen, and his naturally thick and dark hair took a decade off his age. Mom isn't that bad, I defended, and my dad didn't say anything, diplomatic guy that he was. She just looks her age, or a few years older. She worked hard as a high school algebra teacher and was always stressed. Next topic, please.
Anyway, sweetheart, how have you been? I feel like we haven't caught up in forever.
We hadn't. It had been far too long between dinner dates with my dad, which is why I was so happy we were going to spend a whole week together over the Christmas break. Awesome! I got some incredible news, actually. I turned towards him to talk as he drove. His gaze flicked over to me, his lips lifted in a smile.
Tell me.
I got accepted into Sherman.
For chiropractic?
Yes! I squealed, and then swallowed hard to force myself to calm down. His contented sigh and smile said it all.
Oh, Chastity, I'm so proud of you. That's fantastic news.
Neither of my parents had finished college. When they'd gotten pregnant with me, Dad had dropped out to get a job, but they'd split up by the time I was 2. Luckily, Mom had managed to finish her teaching degree when I got older, but they both missed out on some pretty major opportunities in life, thanks to their promiscuity and stupidity. One of the main reasons I did not sleep around. Quite the opposite. I couldn't have done it without you, Dad.
Nah, don't be ridiculous. You're a star, and you should shine.
Both of my parents had helped me enormously through school with living expenses, since I'd earned a full financial scholarship for tuition, but my father was always my biggest cheerleader. Without your help, I could never have studied so hard, Dad. I want you to know how much I appreciate it. His cheekbones were looking suspiciously pink now, and he brushed the back of his free hand against his eyes.
I'm just glad you used that brain of yours for something good. And I hope that means I get free adjustments for the first 5 years.
More like forever. I beamed at him. I could never repay the help he'd given me, but I'd make sure his spine was in tip-top condition for the rest of his life. He chuckled and turned the car off the street and into the gym parking lot near his apartment. I glanced up at the large signage. All Day Health. Dad had managed to work his way up through the commercial construction company he worked for, and now had an office job preparing quotes and building specs for large projects. He had a nice apartment in an upscale part of town and worked out at an exclusive gym. Do you need to lift again before we get home? I joked as he parked and turned the ignition off.
Not exactly. I've got a casual meeting of sorts inside. This investor is really difficult to pin down, so he invited me to have a chat after his training. It's a new business venture I'm looking into. Do you mind if we stop here for 20 minutes before we go home?
I did mind a little bit. I wanted to spend time with him, not sit in the car by myself. Sure, but can I come inside with you? I don't feel like sitting in the car and frying in the sun. He laughed that deep, carefree laugh he'd always had.
Of course. There's a cafe and an area to relax if you want to play on your cell for a bit. I'll show you.
Perfect. I grabbed my bag and we both got out of the car. When we walked inside, the air conditioning hit me in the face like a snowstorm. Wow, it's freezing in here. Dad chuckled and indicated I should follow him, so I did. We walked through a second set of doors and into Nirvana, where the coffee was grinding, soft music played, and I couldn't stop myself from sighing. This is awesome. Nothing like the basic gyms Mom and I had frequented over the years. My father smiled again at me, then stepped over to the counter and spoke to the pretty woman working there. She nodded and he came back to me.
I just spoke to Martine and she'll take care of you. Order anything you want. I won't be long, Chas. I promise. You all right here?
In the lap of luxury? Absolutely. Yeah, sure, Dad. Go. See you in a bit. He disappeared through the frosted glass doors, and I suppressed the urge to squeal. I'd spent the last few weeks cooped up in a small dorm room studying for finals. This was heaven in comparison. Would you like something to drink? The pretty blonde called out, and I walked over to the bar. Sure. I know this is a strange request, but a hot chocolate, if you've got it? She nodded and went over to the coffee machine. I turned and leaned against the bar, letting pure happiness filter over me. When I'm a doctor of chiropractic, I'll belong to a club like this. One day. Growing up with a mother who had very little, we'd never gone on vacations. My father had helped the best he could, and I'd never wanted for anything I actually needed. But now I could see my future ahead, and I was sure my mom would love to join a place like this too. I owed her everything. I'd find a way to make it up to her. All the sacrifices she'd made for me. Just 4.5 more years of school and I'd be able to buy her all the extras she'd missed out on. The frosted glass doors that led into the interior of the health club opened, and my gaze swung toward them, half expecting my dad to walk back through. My belly tightened and clenched with an intensity I'd never experienced. Wow. The man who walked through the door was hot. Literally. You could feel the intensity of his power like a radiant wave of heat. Whoa. His gaze turned my way, and sparks sizzled between us. I couldn't move, and I couldn't look away as heat simmered through me. His lips lifted in a smile as he hefted his sports bag onto his shoulder. He seemed to be going for the doors that led to the outside, but then he turned and headed over to the bar near me. Hiya, Axel. Ice water? The blonde woman asked him, her voice strong and overly friendly. He winked at her and nodded.
You know me well. Thanks, Martine.
I shivered. The timbre of his voice was perfect, deep and rich, strong and sensual. He turned towards me, his perfect white teeth glistening in a smile as his blue eyes sparkled in response.
Here to work out?
Me? I struggled to think of a response. My gaze was drawn by the thin sheen of sweat on his bulging biceps, and I wondered how sweet he would taste. His physique wasn't exaggerated like some puffed-up bodybuilders, but God, did I want to bite those biceps. I shook myself. Me? No, just getting a hot chocolate and waiting for my dad. A warm drink may have seemed odd in this heat, but Christmas was approaching, and it was my holiday go-to. His eyebrows lifted high on his forehead, slight wrinkles at the edge of his eyes indicating he'd be about 10 years older than me, perhaps a little more. Nothing like a hot, older guy to teach you a few things, which I needed desperately.
They sell hot chocolate here?
He asked skeptically. I laughed. Yeah, she said they did anyway. Martine slid a mug across the counter towards me. We don't get many orders for it, but I always have some in stock. Why wouldn't they have it? I asked, lifting the mug to my lips and taking a big sip. Yum. The man in front of me laughed.
Because this is a health club, and most of the women here are terrified of sugar.
I shrugged. Not my problem. I probably carried a bit too much weight by most people's standards, but I did laps at our school pool when I found the time and generally ate well. My life didn't start or begin with my weight. I didn't even own a scale. He stared at me for a moment, as though assessing my soul. Something I wasn't afraid of, because I was a nice person. Or I certainly tried to be. I stared straight back at him, feeling a strength building within me. I'd gotten over the initial shock of his devastating appearance, and now I wanted to know if he had some brain cells between his gorgeous ears. Yes? Was it Axel? He shrugged.
Alternative parents.
I rolled my eyes. Yeah, I know the feeling. He stuck out his hand.
Axel Patterson. Pleased to meet you.
Chastity, I answered, and wasn't surprised when he burst out laughing.
Really?
He grinned, his gaze running up and down my body.
Is there a metal belt hidden under those jeans?
I'd been asked similar questions in the past and always tried to have a smart-ass answer in response. Of course I do. After all, we are the names our parents gave us, aren't we? So tell me, Axel, do you stick your arms out and act like an axle for the wheels in your car? He froze for a moment, his eyes widening in shock before he burst out laughing. Martine pushed the tall, icy glass at him, her interested gaze swinging between us. He picked up his drink and downed the whole thing like a thirsty pelican. When he put it down, he was still smiling.
You're the most interesting person I've met today, Chastity.
I snorted. That doesn't say much for the people you work with, then. His blue eyes sparkled even more as he stared at me, and my gaze swung down to his left hand, bare of a wedding ring.
No, it doesn't.
Chapter 2. Chastity. Axel flicked his wrist around and checked a very expensive-looking watch.
Damn, I've gotta go. But I hope we meet again.
That was very doubtful, since I was only here on my father's dime. You probably won't see me again, Axel. But thank you for the chat. I gave him my biggest smile, and he walked away, shaking his head as though he couldn't believe the things I'd just said to him. The front doors opened and let him back into the sunshine. I dragged myself back to the bar and my drink. He was way out of my league. As if he'd ever be into someone like me. Next to my hot chocolate mug was a large smartphone in a black leather case resting on a black mat. Impossible to see unless you were right next to it. Shit. I grabbed it up and bolted to the door, stepping out into the sunshine and chasing Axel to his car. His very expensive car. Fuck. Is that a Lamborghini? Yep. So far out of my league. I cleared my throat, then forced myself to speak when he didn't turn around. Axel? He turned, keys in hand and a gorgeous smile on his face.
Yes?
I held the phone out to him. I think you forgot this. His eyes widened in surprise, then he took it from me and slipped it into his bag with a sigh.
Thank you very much. I would have been totally lost without that. Damn. I'm not usually so thoughtless.
I waved my hand at him and began to back away. No worries. You just enjoy your day. He stepped towards me.
So, you're beautiful and honest. Any other attributes I should know about?
I laughed. Not beautiful, but thanks anyway.
I'd like to see you again.
I'd like that too, but how? When?
Anytime. Hang on, let me grab my card.
He opened the shiny black car with the button on his keys, leaned inside, and came back out holding a small white card.
Here, please call me. I want to take you out for dinner and get to know you better.
I took the card and stared at the embossed writing. CEO of a management company? No offense, Axel, but I don't think you're going to find me very interesting. I had to be honest because, seriously, I didn't think we had a single thing in common, least of all our exercise habits.
I think you're wrong. You're a breath of fresh air to me.
I snorted, not sure if that was a compliment. Yeah, my mom would say something similar. She's always telling me to think before I speak, but my mouth can't seem to slow down long enough for that to happen. He continued to stare at me as though he'd never seen a person like me before. Perhaps he hadn't. Well, I better get back inside. My father may be looking for me as we speak. He reached out and grabbed my hand, pulling me closer. His fingers were hot and slightly rough against my hand. Strong.
Please say you'll go out with me.
My breath hitched in my throat. He couldn't possibly be serious. But as he waited for my response to his absurd question, my heart began to race inside my chest. I swallowed hard and tried to ignore the way my flesh tingled beneath my plain t-shirt. But you're so far out of my league, I blurted out, then wished I'd kept my thoughts to myself. He cocked his head to the side.
You would prefer me poor?
He asked, kinking one eyebrow up. I huffed out a laugh and pulled my hand out of his grip. My fingers ached to run alongside his hair and pull him into me for a kiss. It had been so long since I'd felt anyone's lips on mine, and he was attractive in every way possible. No, it's just, he cut me off. Not that I had a proper answer to his question.
It's just nothing. Go out with me. Your choice. Anywhere you want.
I lifted my gaze and met his solid blue stare. That sounded like a challenge. Anywhere I want? He nodded, and butterflies fluttered inside my belly. This could be fun. All right, I'll go out with you then. But it's my choice. He gave me a huge smile that made my knees weak.
You're so delicious. I just want to devour you.
I giggled, unable to help myself as a heated flush raced up my cheeks. You sound like the big bad wolf. His grin was the hottest thing I'd ever seen, and I staggered sideways, catching myself on a conveniently located pole.
You all right?
He asked, his smile conveying his humor at the situation. Yeah, thanks. I better go. I began to back away, glancing towards the gym, but my father was nowhere to be seen.
When are we going out for dinner?
He called out, ever persistent. I didn't say it was dinner, I responded, laughing inside, as if I was going to take advantage of some rich guy. I'd been taught better than that. Plus, if I even had a chance with a man like him, I wasn't doing what every woman had done before me. I wasn't going to be boring. His eyebrows drew down in mock outrage.
When?
Axel repeated. I thought quickly. Dad always worked weekends, even when I was with him. Maybe I could sneak out for a few hours in the afternoon. Tomorrow too soon?
Definitely not. What time?
I loved how he let me choose everything. For a man who obviously had total control of his life, it was a lovely gift. 3? I can meet you here if you like. His lips quirked a little, but he didn't ask anything else.
Done. I will see you, gorgeous girl, tomorrow.
I nodded and took slow, careful steps backwards. I clung to his card like a lifeline. I was not letting it go. He gave me one more killer smile that made my insides clench and tighten in a way I hadn't felt before. Then he got in his car and drove away. I wandered back inside in a daze, reaching out for my now barely warm hot chocolate with a stupid smile on my face. What happened? The woman behind the bar asked. She was eyeing me in a way that reminded me of a jealous bitch I'd once known in high school. Her hackles were raised and her eyebrows were lowered. Not a good sign. Oh, nothing. Just gave him back his phone. I wasn't telling her anything. Her mood had changed substantially since my interaction with Axel, and the last thing I wanted was some blow-up from her in front of Dad. I finished my drink and pushed it over the counter towards her. Thanks so much. I wandered over to the couch and settled down just as I heard my dad's voice over my shoulder. I twisted around to see him deep in conversation with an older man with silver streaks through his hair. They shook hands and the man left. Dad walked over to me, his smile full of happiness.
Hey, sweetie. I'm sorry that took a little longer than expected. You ready to go? I hope you weren't too bored while I was gone.
I got up from the couch, slipping Axel's business card into my cell phone case. Nah, of course not. Looking forward to a night of Chinese food and movies, though. He put a comforting arm around my shoulders and tugged me in the direction of the entrance.
You were? Perfect. Because so was I. Chapter 3. Axel. I tapped my fingers along the steering wheel of my car, a strange excitement bubbling in my gut. I hadn't done anything this impulsive in too long. I'd forgotten how good it felt. A movement caught my eye, and I turned to see Chastity walking into the gym's parking lot, dressed in the simplest of clothes: blue jeans, a plain red tank top, flat shoes. Her long blonde hair pulled up into a high ponytail. She looked about 16, and I hoped to God she was older than that. A smile tugged at my lips as she glanced around for me. I dated models, and actresses, and basically women who were professional objects. They knew the score, and marriage was not on the table. Money and fun. And that had been enough for me for a long time. But as I stared at the beautiful, natural girl before me, my heart yearned for more. She twisted around and spotted my car, her face transforming into a huge smile. She rocked back on her heels and walked over. I opened the car door and got out, my hands itching to grab her, pull her close and kiss the living daylights out of her.
Hey,
she said casually as she walked over, a hint of cleavage catching my eye above her red tank top. Hey yourself. I licked my lips and gripped the car door to stop myself from devouring her on the spot. She made my heart pound. That delicious skin surely needed my lips upon it. And how beautiful would she look spread out beneath me? I shook my head to clear the erotic thoughts and forced my mind back to the present. So, where are we off to? A late lunch? I asked, still confused about the time she'd chosen for our first date. 3 p.m. was just odd. She cocked her head to the side.
Why? Are you hungry?
In truth, I wasn't. Not really. But I gave you carte blanche on our activity. And if this were any other woman I knew, we'd be sitting at the most expensive restaurant in the city, drinking French champagne for the rest of the day.
Good. My dad's in meetings for a few hours, so I have some time. Can we go drive to the beach and have ice cream?
I didn't know which shocking piece of information I needed to tackle first. Your dad. How old was this woman that she still lived with her parents? And did I need to drive her home, like, now?
Yeah, we're spending the weekend together since I don't get to see him much.
Family-oriented was good. I hadn't had a lot of that growing up. And you want ice cream? Of all things.
Yes, is that okay?
She asked, her slow smile making me want to grab her high ponytail and drag her in for a kiss. Absolutely. The beach is 20 minutes away. That gives us a bit of time, I suppose. I was supposed to be working myself, but if she had a few hours free to eat ice cream and talk, then I was clearing my schedule. Jump in. She walked around the car, nothing in her hands, and jumped in. Don't you have a bag? I asked her. What woman went anywhere without her makeup, phone, and purse, and whatever else women hid in those things? Chastity reached behind her and grabbed a phone and some cash from her back pocket, placing them both on the dashboard.
Got what I need.
I could only nod as I stared at the crumpled $20 bills and the typical smartphone with the spangly pink case. I'm not sure I'm going to like the answer to this question, but how old are you, Chastity? She had to be 21. God help me if she's not. I started the car and she looked my way with a devilish grin.
How old do I look?
I groaned. Oh, fuck. About 16. She laughed, loud and hard.
That's good to know.
I waited, but she didn't answer. No, seriously. How old are you?
I'm 21. How old are you?
Relief flooded me. That wasn't too bad. Legal, at least. I'm 40, which was old enough. Too old, if you asked me. She laughed a bit softer this time.
You don't look 40.
I winked at her. I work pretty hard at that, so thank you. I ate clean, worked out hard, and was embarrassed to admit that I owned more vitamins and supplements than the local health food store.
I would have said closer to 50 myself,
she said calmly, not a bit of humor written on her face. I spluttered as I stared at her, my mouth hanging open. Huh? Was she serious? How could she possibly think I was 50? This time she burst out laughing so hard I saw tears at the edges of her eyes.
You should see your face. Honestly, you've got to lighten up, Axel.
I pressed my foot to the accelerator and turned the car into traffic, heading for the beach as requested. I hadn't been teased in far too long, and the uncomfortable feeling was like spiders crawling on my skin.
Axel, you okay?
I think so. I didn't like to think I was vain, but damn it. 50? Yeah, fine, I swallowed hard. Humble pie tasted like shit. I haven't had anyone tell me I look older than I am, ever, I don't think. She shrugged.
Well, I hate to tell you, but you need some teasing. You take yourself too seriously.
We pulled up at the first set of lights, and I turned to study her face. Well, that's what happens when you run a billion-dollar company. Her eyebrows shot up in the air, and her bare shoulders shuddered.
That must be stressful,
she said, not sounding very interested. Didn't she know what that meant for my life? Or what that could mean for her in the future if we continue to see each other? It means I can do anything I want, anytime. She snorted.
Really? Can you go on a 3-month trip around Europe? And I don't mean to work. I mean like travel, relax, vacay.
I eyed her carefully, then set off again as the light turned green. I wanted to watch her face during this conversation because I had a very strong feeling that I was going to keep this girl around for a lot longer than a few nights, and I wanted to know how much my money mattered. If I set things up properly, then yes. Sort of. She snorted again.
No, you can't. And if I ever went overseas, I'd want to backpack through Europe. No swanky hotels, no plans. Just set off and go. Stay as long as I want in any place I liked. No computers, no phones, just adventure. I bet you couldn't leave your billion-dollar company long enough for that.
This conversation had taken a weird turn. You want to travel rough? Did women still do that?
Of course. I want to do everything.
So you don't come from money then? I swear, I felt about 5 years old when she lifted her chin and stared down at me over her nose.
My parents worked their asses off to put me through school. Am I looking forward to becoming a chiropractor and paying them back for all their support? Absolutely. But do I think money buys happiness? Absolutely not.
I continued to glance over at her as we drove. My heart had begun to pound like it was readying itself for a run. I liked this girl. Her conviction, her naivete. Everything about her screamed pure and good. 2 things I hadn't had much of through my life. The silence stretched until I decided to continue the strange conversation. It sounds like you had a great childhood, unlike mine. She relaxed back into the seat, picking up her phone and stuffing the cash into the case.
Oh, it wasn't amazing, but it was okay. My parents split before I even remember, so I was always shuffling between 2 houses, which was hard. But both of them made it work as well as possible, and I was always loved.
That's better than mine. What are you doing?
How come?
She asked. I wanted to bite my tongue off. What was I doing, exposing all my history to the poor girl? Nothing. Tell me more about your parents.
No, I want to know. Tell me.
I considered the wisdom of my next move. Exposing anything about myself was never a good decision, but being honest was probably the best way to go with a woman like this. I shrugged as I drove, trying to make light of a pretty dark topic. I barely saw my parents growing up. They had too much money and no time for me. Now they live in London most of the year, and I hardly see them.
So, most of your money is inherited?
Her tone was cold as she asked. I grunted. Hardly. My parents believe in making your own fortune. They paid for a good education, then said, "You're on your own." And I've been working hard ever since. She seemed to relax at hearing that.
I like that, she said.
then sat up straight and waved her hands.
Not the part about your parents being assholes. That's crap. But I like that you've made your own way. I think that's important.
The atmosphere inside the car relaxed, and Chastity stared out the window as we neared the beach.
Could we park near the shops on Gulf Boulevard? There's an ice creamery there that I love.
Sure. I followed her instructions and pulled the car into a spot near the beach. My breath whooshed out of me as I stared at the crashing waves, the sunlight dancing off the never-ending blue. She reached over and squeezed my hand.
Haven't been to the beach in a while, huh?
Nope, not in months. Longer, actually, but I wasn't admitting to that.
Great, then let's go.
She released her hold on me, and I gasped from the strength of the tingles on my skin. Ridiculous. I shook myself as I got out of the car. She walked ahead, stepping up in front of one of the small shops and ordered a big waffle cone with 3 scoops of ice cream. Damn, the calories. She'd paid for herself before I'd had a chance to notice.
What do you want, Axel? My treat.
I wanted to scoff at her, but I could see from her clear eyes she wasn't joking. What do you recommend?
Oh, everything. But this chocolate one is my favorite.
She stepped closer and held the cone up to me to lick. I felt like an idiot, but did what she asked. I leaned forward and licked the chocolate ice cream. Dark, rich creaminess exploded across my tongue. I swallowed hard as her pupils dilated. Yum. She turned towards the man behind the counter.
Double scoop and a waffle cone, please.
I went to protest, but she waved her hands at me, and I was soon holding exactly what she'd ordered for me. When the guy handed her back her change, I pulled my wallet out. No, here. I thrust some money at the man who'd scooped our cones. Give her money back, please. The guy held up his hands in surrender, chuckled, and walked away from me. Chastity grabbed my sleeve and tugged.
Not a chance. I've been coming to this place for 10 years, and your money's no good here. Let's go for a walk.
The man behind the bar gave me a sympathetic smile, and I tucked the cash away. Fucking hell. That's a first. I stumbled onto the beach, my Italian leather shoes stiff and annoying.
Let's go closer to the water. The sand's harder there. Easier to walk on.
I followed her like a puppy, unable to resist. What sort of magic was at work here? So, now you've got me here. What are you going to do with me? I asked her. She grinned and kept licking her ice cream.
I don't know yet.
A growl rolled through me, and I reached out and grabbed her hand, pulling her closer so that our pelvises met and I could slide my arm around her waist. She stared up at me, our gazes connecting like 2 live wires. You are far too much to resist. You know that? She swallowed hard.
No one's ever said that to me before.
Well, they're idiots. I couldn't resist any longer. I dropped my head just as she lifted her mouth to mine. I pressed my lips to hers and moaned as her heat touched me. The attraction between us roared to life like a log igniting on smoldering kindling. I tightened my hold on her with the hand that wasn't holding the ice cream, tasting her sweetness. The coldness of the ice cream offset the heat of her mouth, and I pulled her even closer, wanting her naked and writhing in pleasure. I dragged my lips away. Come home with me. She blinked a few times, then stepped away, her head down. What's wrong? I asked, suddenly regretting showing my hands so early. That wasn't like me either. She tilted her head to the side.
Let's walk.
She stepped closer to the crashing waves, and I trailed behind her, the cold trickle of melting ice cream flowing across my hand. What happened? I asked. 1 minute she was as hot as the sand, and the next she was freezing me out.
I don't think going back to your place is appropriate yet.
Appropriate, I parroted. I hadn't heard words used like that in forever. She turned to me and rolled her eyes heavily.
I met you yesterday. We've spent an hour in each other's company total. Is it really your normal practice to take a woman to bed that quickly?
On occasion. No, but I thought the attraction between us was exceptional. That you wanted the same thing I did.
I do, but we shouldn't do that yet.
She was shifting and fidgeting like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar, and I started to smell a rat. Look, if this is some sort of play, Chastity, I'm not into games.
What are you talking about?
She was glaring at me now, but the warning bells were pealing madly. If you like playing the role of a tease, I have to tell you that's not something I'm into. I like my women willing. Anger was building in my gut like a storm, hot and fast.
No, it's not that,
she said, her voice sounding a little hurt. Then what? Because I thought you were different from the other women I've dated. But if different translates into a better liar, then I don't want anything to do with you. Why did they all play the same games? It made no sense. Why couldn't they just be honest? She sighed and her gaze dropped, as did my gut. I should have known better than to act upon my lustful thoughts. Served me right to think I'd found someone unique for once.
Chapter 4. Chastity. Fear poured through me like hot rain, making my heart pound and my stomach tighten. He wasn't going to want to speak to me after he learned the truth. No way. I don't like saying it, I managed to get out, clinging to the cone in my hand.
You don't like saying what? He ground out.
Everything about Axel had changed and I hated it. His mood, his face. Why was I suddenly the bad guy here? Obviously he was used to getting what he wanted when he wanted it, and screw anybody else. I heaved a sigh and put my ice cream to my lips, licking the rivulets of heaven. A fun date had just taken a terrible turn.
Maybe we should just go back to the gym, Chastity,
Axel said, his voice hard now. Okay. I nodded and began walking back to the stupidly expensive car. Why was he so angry with me? I walked past a trash can and threw my still beautiful ice cream in, my stomach rolling over and twisting like tumbleweed. What a waste of money and time. I could have just stayed at home and eaten out of my dad's freezer. He wouldn't have been angry at me. When I got to the car, I turned around to see Axel still standing by the trash, holding his cone and staring inside the can as though wondering if he was going to throw his out too. Are we going back or not? I called out, and he suddenly dropped his ice cream into the trash and stormed over to me. What's wrong now? I asked, stepping back and away from his unwarranted anger.
I want to know where I went wrong. Tell me, please. You seemed so natural and different from all the other women I've met. How could I not know that you were just a tease?
I put my hands on my hips and glared at him. Obviously, the poor guy had been duped by far too many gold diggers in the past, but I was allowed to say no without being accused of being like them. I wasn't lying. What are you talking about? He was just being plain stupid now.
I mean this.
He waved his hand back and forth between us.
The sweet smile, paying for our ice cream, all so you can reject me when I fall for your act. I don't get it.
Now I was getting angry. Look, just because I don't want to jump into bed with you after one kiss does not mean I'm a tease, okay? Who the hell do you think you are? Some sort of god?
No, of course not.
Then why take such offense because I asked you to back off for a bit?
Because I know women, and you had all the hot signals on.
I laughed in his face and squared myself up to glare at him. You know women, huh? What a crock of shit. His eyebrows shot up.
I do,
he declared. How much do you want to bet? He pulled back and looked me up and down, no desire or heat in his expression now.
$1,000.
Easy. Done. Tell me how many lovers I've had. His eyes narrowed and his mouth flicked into an odd smile.
You won't tell the truth about that even if I do guess correctly.
I leaned forward, connecting our gazes as tightly as I could so he'd see if I lied. How many men, Axel? His posture relaxed and he finally said,
3.
I kept our gazes locked. Really? You think I'm some sort of amazing tease, but I've only had 3 lovers. That doesn't add up. His shoulders slumped a little and his gaze slid sideways.
I didn't say you were experienced. You just seem to know how to play the game.
I put all my anger into my gaze and spoke slowly. Look into my eyes when I say this, Axel, because I know you can tell when someone is lying. You wouldn't be filthy rich if you couldn't. Nod if you agree. He nodded. Look at me. His gaze slid back to mine, and I was beginning to see the start of regret in his eyes, but I was too angry now. I have never had a lover. I took a deep breath. Ever. His eyes went wide and he stepped back, bumping into his side mirror. But I wasn't done. I put my hands on my hips and glared at him. And just because I don't want to jump into bed with you right now doesn't make me a tease. It makes you an arrogant bastard. I waited for that to sink in before putting my hand on the car door handle. Now unlock the car. I want to go home.
Chastity, I'm so sorry.
You should be, because I am different and special. I've always known it, and so has anyone else who's bothered to spend more than an hour with me. So please open the car door and take me home. He nodded, pressed a button that unlocked the car, and I got in. I focused on my phone the whole drive back and didn't look at him once. What a fucking waste of time that was. When we finally pulled into the gym's parking lot, I opened the door with a grunt and got out as fast as I could. Dad's house was only a block away, and I needed the walk to let off some steam. Pity I couldn't go into the gym and beat up one of the punching bags.
Chastity, please stop.
I turned around and crossed my arms over my chest. What? If he thought I could be sweet-talked out of this, then he was seriously mistaken.
I'm so sorry I accused you of playing me. I know you weren't.
Oh, so now you're sorry. Yeah, now you say that because you know I'm a virgin. But guess what? I don't care. You're nothing but a spoiled little rich kid who expects to get everything he wants when he wants it. Well, let me tell you, I'm not for sale. I turned around and stomped off, anger filling my hands and fists. How could he be so stupid? How could I? I knew better than to trust a guy with so much money and so little heart.
Chastity,
Axel stopped, then held up his hands, palms up, as though he'd given up. What? I demanded. He pulled out his wallet.
I owe you $1,000. That was our bet, right? I would never have guessed that you were a
virgin, I exploded at him. I'm a virgin. You can say it. You were too once upon a time. He pulled out a wad of notes and handed them to me.
Here you go.
I took the money, more because I was confused rather than anything else. What do you mean? Oh my God. You carry $1,000 around with you? I held it up with both hands. Wow. This was a month's rent for my mom, and he'd handed it over like it was nothing, which to him it probably was.
I'm sorry, again,
Axel said, stepping back. I groaned, rushed him, and pushed the money back into his shirt breast pocket. I don't want your money.
Then what do you want?
The question hung in the air, and I found myself struggling to stay angry at him. I want to walk home. Thank you for the crappy date. Amazingly, it wasn't my worst by far. Chapter 5. Chastity. I turned on my heel and started marching through the parking lot, then down the street. Stupid, idiotic man. He could have called me dumb, or ugly, or lazy, none of which I was, but still, I would have taken less offense to all those words. But a tease? He couldn't have been further from the truth. The sound of a car's idling engine hit my hearing, and I turned to look behind me.
Jump in. I'll drive you home.
I shook my head and kept walking. No thanks. My dad's place is only 5 minutes from here.
You didn't answer my question,
Axel shouted out his window. Which one was that? He stopped the car and got out.
What do you want? If you don't want me for bedroom stuff or money, what do you want?
The insult in those words was too enormous to process properly, and yet most of it was directed at himself. I frowned at him as he stepped closer and swallowed hard. It was difficult for me not to stare when I looked directly at him. He was so gorgeous, he made my brain function in slow motion. I don't know, I said, not sure what he wanted me to say. When he turned away as though disappointed, I grabbed his shirt-covered arm and turned him back. But you shouldn't categorize women or yourself in that way. It's degrading, mostly to you. He narrowed his eyes at me.
What do you mean?
I rolled my eyes. Are you serious? I huffed out a sigh and decided to be embarrassingly honest, which for me was par for the course most of the time. I didn't believe in beating around the bush. You are insanely hot, and way before I saw your car or your business card, I wanted you to kiss me. He turned back and slid his hand around my waist, tugging me close.
Then why? I know why.
He sighed too.
I'm sorry I tried to rush you.
I cupped his face in my hands. You are someone I want to get to know, But you need to realize that I've never done any of this before, and I don't want you for your money, or status, or whatever. I'm going to make my own money, just like you." He grinned.
A doctor of chiropractic, huh?
I grinned at him. "You a fan?" He nodded.
Yep. Got my weekly adjustment booked in for Monday mornings, 7 a.m.
I threw myself at him, hugging him tightly. I didn't know why, but I had to hold him. I didn't know him very well, but now all I could see were the vulnerabilities he obviously tried hard to hide. He was gorgeous, successful, and 40. But had he ever been married? Kids? His parents hadn't loved him, so had he ever let anyone else? I pulled away and he stared down at me, his eyebrows lowered over his eyes.
What was that for?
I swallowed the lump in my throat. I just wanted to."
Does this mean I'm forgiven?
He asked. I bit my lip. I suppose so. After all, could I really blame a guy who obviously had more scars than a pro football player for assuming I was like every other woman? But I wasn't, and he needed to know that. But no more second-guessing my motives. I'll be honest with you. I promise. He inhaled sharply.
Okay. So you don't want to come back to my apartment then?
I was surprised by the question, but then he followed it with the most gorgeous grin, and I knew he was joking, so of course I had to tease him. How could I resist? "I will, but only for an epic makeout session. Think you can handle the blue balls?" His mouth dropped open. I laughed. "Another day, maybe?" He ran a hand through his disheveled hair and huffed out a laugh.
I can handle the blue balls, but I'm not sure I can keep my hands to myself. I'd want to feel you come around me.
It was my turn for my mouth to drop open. Axel grinned.
Yeah, exactly.
I pressed my lips together, trying not to laugh. What a thing to say. "Well, how about we try again?" I asked. "Another date? Maybe dinner this time?" He nodded, straightening up and looking more confident by the second.
Tonight?
I laughed and shook my head. Already got plans with my dad. "How about tomorrow night, or Monday even?"
Tomorrow,
Axel said.
Definitely.
I smiled, then found myself staring at his lips and aching to kiss him once more. My dad's apartment is just down the block, but
I'll walk you.
Okay. We turned and started ambling along the sidewalk. I took his hand because, why not? He stared at me a moment when I did, but didn't shake me off. Instead, he gripped my fingers tighter, and my breath caught in my throat. I was in so much trouble when it came to this guy. He was too beautiful, genuine, raw, and so different from anyone else I'd ever met. But was a mutual attraction enough to keep us together when we were leagues apart in every other way? We walked the final half block, and suddenly we were standing outside my dad's massive apartment complex, and I was thinking of reasons to delay going back inside. Well, Axel slid his hand up my arms until he finally cupped my face and lifted my chin, so I was staring up into his gorgeous eyes.
I'm going to kiss you goodbye.
I nodded, lifting my arms to encircle his neck and drag him closer. But the kiss was a chaste one, a mere brushing of his lips against mine before he was pulling back. I groaned. "Now you're teasing me." He laughed and slowly stepped away.
I'm seducing you. There's a difference.
I pressed my lips together, trying to hold on to his taste forever. I better go up. Dad will be done with his meetings by now, most likely. I'm assuming you don't want to come up to meet him. I waggled my eyebrows at the billionaire, as the man ran a hand over the back of his neck and stared at his shoes.
Nah, it's okay.
I laughed aloud at that one. Too early? He nodded and lifted his head to meet my gaze.
Yup, a bit.
Then he stared up at the building.
My best friend lives here, actually. It's a small world.
I shrugged. There were hundreds of units in this complex. Well, next time you're here visiting him, come by. He nodded, his eyes blazing with promise.
Will do.
He began walking backwards, a smile still glued to his luscious lips.
I'd better get going.
I watched him go, loving how young and silly he seemed as he stumbled across the street and walked back to his car. If only his business partners could see him now, all relaxed and embarrassed and unsure. I kinda loved it. Bye! I waved at him with my arm over my head. He chuckled to himself, turned, and walked away. Damn, he had a fine ass. No man should be that handsome and that rich. It wasn't fair to the rest of the world. With my heart singing, I practically skipped into my dad's apartment building and zipped up to the 10th floor where he lived. I didn't knock on the door. I could hear him talking inside, through the door, and he had his business voice on. I pulled out the single key in my back pocket and slid it into the hole. Dad raised his hand in greeting as I stepped over the threshold, then turned back to his phone call. I went to the bathroom and stared in the mirror, taking note of my shining eyes and my 2 red lips. You're in way over your head with this guy, I said to my reflection, and yet I found myself laughing, bubbles of happiness floating to the surface. I shook my head, still staring in the mirror. This is crazy. I needed a shower or something to distract me and use up all this excess energy. So I stripped out of my clothes and climbed into the shower, the hot water beating down on my hair.
Hey, sweetie,
Dad called into the bathroom, the door only opened a crack.
How was your date?
I laughed at how excited he seemed. Been waiting to ask that question for a long time, haven't you? He chuckled.
Well, you work too hard. You deserve some fun, too.
I was in total agreement. Squeezing the shampoo into my hands, I worked it into a lather, then started scrubbing my head. It was okay, but it was just ice cream.
So, are you gonna see him again? Or cut and run?
I weighed how much to tell my dad, thinking about the age difference. Not gonna happen.
Of course,
Dad said.
I'm surprised you didn't organize something for tonight.
I smiled as I rinsed off the shampoo. No way. I'm looking forward to our night. I couldn't see his smile, but I could imagine it.
Thai takeout for dinner?
He asked.
Or you want to go out?
Thai is perfect, I said. And a movie, maybe?
I'll see what I've got. Take your time.
He disappeared, leaving me to think about Axel once more. I'd never met anyone like him. He was extremely intelligent and successful. That was obvious. But he'd worked his ass off to get there, which I liked. He was also the hottest man I'd ever seen in real life. It was definitely in the body and the gorgeous face, but what I really loved about Axel was his confidence, the way he looked at me. Then what made me want to curl up in his lap and stay there forever was his honesty, his vulnerability. Everyone always said they wanted a bad boy, but that just wasn't right. Girls wanted a bad boy who would change just for her. That never worked out well. Axel was definitely a bad boy with the stupid expensive car and black book a mile long. He'd probably had more bedtime encounters than I'd had hot dinners. And yet, that didn't put me off, somehow. It made me wonder how the hell I was going to compete in his bed and his heart when I had next to zero experience. But I wasn't one to be put off by a challenge. I conditioned, brushed all the tangles out of my long hair, then got out of the shower to inspect myself in the mirror once more. Being too thin was not a problem for me. My boobs were big, and so was my ass. But if the way Axel looked at me was any indication of what he'd like to see in bed, then he was going to see plenty of it. I wrapped my hair up in a towel, my breath hitching in my throat. Damn, I was excited. And I hadn't felt this truly elated in a long time. My focus was so intense at school, I really hadn't stopped to smell the roses much this year. Not ever, really. Well, Christmas was a week away, and I had a few weeks during winter break to have some fun. Now, to work out just how much fun I truly wanted to have with a guy twice my age. I giggled as I wrapped myself in a towel and darted out of the bathroom and to my room. The answer was plenty. I wanted to have as much as possible, and damn his age, experience, and his money. This was fate, and I was going to ride this roller coaster out.